Jace stood at the edge of the training yard as the twin suns of the alien planet burned in the sky, and sweat ran down his neck as laughter rose behind him again louder. This time crueler too. He knew it was them, the same group of alien cadets who always made fun of him. Their blue skin shimmered in the heat, their sharp eyes full of pride and mockery. They wore the academy uniform like it was made just for them, while Jace's human body looked out of place, small, soft, and weak by their standards. He kept his eyes low, not because he was afraid, but because he was tired of fighting battles that did not matter. He had come here hoping to learn to become stronger, to join the galaxy's finest warriors, and make Earth proud. But since the first day he arrived at the academy, the aliens made it clear that he was just a joke to them, a funny little human who should never have been accepted into their elite program. Even the trainers barely looked at him, and when they did it was only to sigh or shake their heads. He had passed the entry test through pure effort and raw survival instincts, not because of any natural gift. His body had limits, but his will did not, and he told himself that was enough. But now, as another laugh cracked behind him and someone tossed a fake medal at his feet, calling him the honorary weakest soldier in the system, he clenched his fists and tried to stay calm. Jace turned slowly and met the cold stare of Zarvin, the biggest of the cadets, with arms like steel cables and eyes that never smiled. Zarvin stepped forward, too close, and stared down at him, then spoke in a deep voice full of sarcasm, asking if Jace was ready to lead them into war, maybe against insects or shadows. The others burst into laughter again, and Jace turned away, not because he was beaten, but because this was not the time to fight. This was not the real battlefield, and he had not come to win their approval. He had come for something else, though he did not yet know what it was. Later that day, a storm hit during flight practice, violent and fast. The sky turned green and yellow as wine screamed across the sky. Jace was in a solo pod practicing low-orbit maneuvers when the system shorted out and the controls sparked. He tried to signal for help, but the storm blocked all comms, and the pod spiraled down through thick clouds toward the surface of a dead moon below. His heart raced as the pod shook like a broken bird, and alarm screamed in his ears. He gripped the harness and prayed it would not end here, not like this, not before he proved he belonged somewhere. The crash came hard. The pod slammed into the rocky ground and skidded across the surface, sparks flying as metal tore and folded. The world spun, and then everything Stoppages opened his eyes hours later, the lights in the pod dim and flickering, the air thin but still breathable. He checked his suit, then forced the hatch open and stepped out into silence. The landscape was strange, dry, and covered in dark ash. But something felt wrong, like the ground itself had a heartbeat. He walked slowly, scanning the area until he saw something odd in the distance. A shape too smooth and sharp to be natural. He moved closer, each step kicking up gray dust until the structure came into full view. It looked like a ship half buried in the ground, not crashed, but placed there hidden on purpose. Its surface was black metal, covered in lines and markings that pulsed softly like veins of light running under skin. Jace reached out with one hand, fingers trembling, and touched the hull. The moment his skin made contact, the ship responded. A low hum rose under his palm. The lights grew brighter, and the ground seemed to shift slightly, as if the whole moon had just taken a deep breath. Just froze, but did not pull back. His heart thundered in his chest, and for the first time since he joined the academy, the laughter of the aliens did not matter, because deep under this dead moon, something old and powerful had just woken up. And it had responded, not to them, not to the strong or the proud, but to him, to a human too. The one who did not belong. And the silence that followed was not empty, but full of something waiting, something ancient, something ready to be found. The hum beneath Jace's hand grew louder as the markings along the black surface lit up one by one, forming strange symbols that moved like rivers of light. The air felt charged and heavy, as if a storm was building deep underground. The ship responded to him, and only him. The lights did not flicker when he moved closer. They pulsed brighter with every step he took toward the entrance that slowly opened before him with a sound like air being sucked out of the world. He hesitated at the threshold, not out of fear but out of awe. He could see a long hallway dimly lit by soft blue veins that stretched along the walls. The walls themselves curved smoothly with no sharp edges. No signs of bolts, or seems like the entire ship had been grown instead of built. Jace stepped inside. His boots made no sound on the strange floor. The temperature shifted around him from cold to warm, then cold again. The air smelled clean, too clean, no dust, no decay, no signs of life or death. He followed the hallway as it curved deeper into the ship until it opened into a vast chamber filled with floating panels rotating slowly above a circular platform in the center. A single object stood tall and silent. It looked like armor, but not like anything he had ever seen. It was dark, silver with lines that shimmered like liquid metal, and it stood upright as if worn by an invisible soldier. Jace walked toward it, drawn by something he could not explain. Each step echoed in his mind, not in sound, but in memory. He began to see flashes of something else, not his own thoughts, but memories that were not his. Battles fought in burning skies, warriors screaming in languages he did not know, machines torn apart by blades of light, and the sound of drums that shook the stars. The armor pulsed once, and a voice filled the chamber, not from speakers, but from inside his own head. The voice was neither male nor female, neither warm nor cold. It simply said, "Guardian recognized, sequence initiated." The armor began to shift, its plates sliding open like petals of a steel flower, waiting for him to step inside. Jace looked around. There was no one here, no one to stop him, no one to tell him he was not strong enough, no one to laugh. He stepped forward and placed his hand on the chest of the armor. It reacted instantly, wrapping around his body piece by piece. It closed around his legs, his chest, his arms, until the helmet sealed around his head. And everything went dark for a moment. Then light returned, not from his eyes, but from 1,000 new senses. He could feel the ship around him, the air, the pressure, the pulse of the moon's core. He could feel the stars above, even though stone and metal blocked the sky. His strength doubled, then tripled. He could feel energy moving through his limbs like fire, but controlled, not wild, not random. It was like he had become part of something ancient, something waiting for him all along. A map appeared in his vision lines, connecting stars and systems, places he had never heard of, places marked in red with words he could not read, yet somehow understood. Danger, silence, war. He turned his head, and the ship responded. The walls shifted, the panels moved, the room transformed into a command center. He was no longer just a visitor, he was the pilot, the chosen one, and still the voice in his mind spoke, softly telling him the truth. The armor was made for a protector, a being who could connect with the lost systems of the ancient builders, the ones who had vanished long ago after a great war. The armor had waited and sealed for thousands of years, untouched, because no one else could wake it. No alien, no machine, only him, only human blood outside. The moon shook lightly as deep under the surface more systems came online. The old ship stretching its limbs after a long sleep. Jace walked through the ship with new eyes. Panels opened when he passed. Strange symbols shifted into human words. Door control, gravity core, life support. He was not afraid, not anymore. He belonged here. He felt it in his bones. He was not the weak one, not the joke, not the slow human they mocked. He was something new. He stood on the ship's main deck, looking at the stars on a large screen, and for the first time in his life, he smiled, not because he felt proud, but because he felt ready. Somewhere out there, the galaxy still believed he was lost, just another failed human drifting through space, but he had found something, or maybe it had found him. The ship had waited, and now it had chosen, and soon the others would see the truth. The human they laughed at was no longer alone, no longer weak, no longer without power, and the silence of the stars now listened to him. The armor pulsed with soft light as Jace moved through the ancient corridors, each step heavier than the last, not because of weight, but because of what now lived within him. The armor did not feel like metal or machinery. It felt alive, and it whispered, not with words, but with memory, flashes of battles, long-gone ships torn open in the void of space, voices screaming commands through burning air, warriors standing alone against endless fire. The ship responded to him like it had been waiting forever, for a command, for a breath, for life. It showed him more than just walls and doors. It showed him past events, moments frozen in light, projections of beings who once walked these halls, not alien, not machine, but tall figures in armor like his. Their faces hidden, their presence commandingus, stood in the core chamber where the main engine glowed like a sleeping heart. And when he stepped close, the engine woke from its dream. The walls shifted again, metal bent smoothly, revealing another hallway, sealed by strange light. Symbols danced in the air before him until they settled into words he could now read. Access granted inside. He found a chamber filled with strange items, weapons, tools, armor parts, all floating quietly in zero gravity. He reached out, and one of the weapons moved toward him slowly, like a fish swimming through water. The moment he touched it, knowledge poured into his mind. How to hold it, how to use it, how to shape it. It was not a weapon in the way Earth knew. It was a living tool designed to respond to thought and bond with the one who held Ith. Took the weapon, and it fused into the armor, becoming part of him, not attached, but absorbed. He felt stronger, not just in body, but in presence, like space itself made room for him. The armor continued to adjust and improve, reshaping itself with every new room he entered. His breath no longer fogged his visor. The suit regulated everything perfectly. Even his heartbeat had changed, slower, steadier, like a soldier at peace, even while surrounded by war. But the deeper he went, the louder the memories became. He began to see not just battles, but faces. A woman with bright eyes and silver tattoos across her cheeks, a child holding a glowing orb in both hands, a warrior standing before a crowd raising a fist as light burst from the sky. These images came with emotions: fear, pride, loss, courage. They were not his memories, but they lived in him now, like ghosts waiting to be heard. Jace found the final chamber, a room larger than all the rest, shaped like a circle with a platform in the center. Above it hovered a sphere pulsing with golden light. He stepped forward, and the light wrapped around him like a warm storm, spinning faster and faster, until everything turned white. Then came the voice again, calm, steady, clearer than before. Guardian, you are chosen, not by blood, not by strength, but by will. Jace stood still as the light faded and the platform rose, carrying him higher, until he saw a new vision, not a memory, but a warning. Systems blinked into life across the screen. Star systems he did not know, blinking red, yellow, green. Some were silent, some full of energy, others were dark, empty, marked with a symbol he did not recognize. The ship showed him data thousands of years old, a war that tore through galaxies, a weapon so powerful it was hidden and broken into parts. The armor was one piece, the ship another, and others were still out there waiting. He understood now. This was no simple find, no lucky accident. The armor had chosen him because it needed someone who would not run, someone who would stand even when mocked, even when alone. Jace gripped the edge of the console and asked the ship to show him Earth. The image appeared blue-green, distant, safe, but surrounded by territories he did not trust. He zoomed in and saw satellites floating like insects, watched by eyes he could not name. He asked the ship how long the armor had been here. The answer came back instantly: time held in stasis 6,923 years. He whispered the number to himself, then stared at the stars again. He knew what would happen next. The Academy would see him return wearing this armor, and they would not understand. They would fear it, they would question it, and some would try to take it. But Jace no longer cared about fitting in. He no longer needed to be accepted by those who only knew how to laugh. He had a mission now, a purpose not given by them, but found by fate, by time, by something bigger. The armor had not just chosen him, he had chosen it too. He turned to the ship and gave a simple command: take me back. The stars shifted as the engines came to life, the ship rising from the moon's grip. Like a phoenix from Ashan, Jace stood tall, no longer the weak one, no longer the outsider. The first human in thousands of years to wear the armor of the Forgotten Guardians. Asterisk. The ship moved like it remembered the stars, engines pulsing with ancient rhythm as it cut through space toward the Academy that had forgotten him. The halls of the vessel were quiet, but not empty. They whispered with echoes of warriors long gone, their presence lingering in the metal, in the lights, in the silent of old systems now reborn. Jace stood at the helm, his armor glowing faintly like it breathed with him, not over him, not around him, but part of him. The Academy loomed ahead, its towers rising from the surface of the moon base like proud fingers reaching toward the black sky. Ships flew in tight patterns around it, sleek and fast, but none carried the weight of age or meaning like the one Jace piloted. His return did not go unnoticed. Signals burst across channels, alarms whispered through security lines. The system registered a vessel of unknown class and unknown origin approaching at combat speed. Commanders barked orders, scrambled teams moved toward their launch bays. Defense grids powered up. The Academy did not know who or what was coming, and in fear they prepared for battle. But the ship slowed gently as it neared the station. It sent no weapons charge, no threat, just a signal that pulsed once, then repeated. Guardian has returned. The bay doors opened because the ship made them. Open lights flickered down the long tunnel as the vessel entered and settled without sound or resistance. Cadets gathered by the hundreds. Silent, unsure, afraid, the instructors stood behind them, weapons drawn, though their hands shook slightly. Then the hatch opened, and Jace stepped out, the same boy they had mocked days ago, but changed, transformed. His steps made no sound, but each one echoed through the hearts of those who watched. His armor shimmered like liquid steel wrapped in light. Symbols danced slowly across the surface, shifting language by the second. No one moved, no one laughed. They could only stare. Xarvan stood among them, arms crossed, jaw tight, trying to look unimpressed, but his eyes betrayed him. They flicked across the armor, scanning for weakness. Finding none, one instructor finally stepped forward, demanding to know what this was, what tech he had stolen, and from where. Jace said nothing at first, then lifted his hand slowly, and the ship behind him responded. The lights along its body glowed brighter, and a voice spoke through every speaker across the station, not loud but calm, not angry but ancient. Guardian has returned. Vessel has rejoined. The path balance must be restored. The instructor stepped back, eyes wide, voice failing. Jace looked around at the faces now filled with doubt, fear, confusion. He saw cadets who once tossed stones, now hiding behind each other. He saw trainers who refused him, now unable to meet his gaze. He walked past them slowly, without hate, without pride, just purpose. Inside the briefing hall, the council met in haste, demanding to see him, to question him, to decide his fate. Jace stood before them as they debated whether he was a threat or an asset, whether the armor made him a danger or a tool they could use. They did not see him as a person, only as a power to control. One of the high counselors stood and ordered him to remove the armor, to surrender it to the science corps for study, for safety. The armor responded before Jace could speak, its voice cold and clear. Guardian is bonded. Interference will not be allowed. When a guard stepped forward, the armor glowed brighter, and the floor beneath his feet cracked with heat, forcing him back. The council fell silent. Jace finally spoke, his voice calm, steady, saying he had not come to fight, but to warn that what the armor showed him, what the ship remembered, was too big for politics or pride. There were other powers waking, old enemies, old weapons, things forgotten because they were too dangerous to remember, and if they wanted to survive, they had to stop laughing at humans, stop treating strength as something only built in muscle or born in blood. The council did not answer right away, their faces tight with fear and thought. Jace turned and walked out of the room as behind him the whispers of the academy began to grow. They no longer saw him as the weak one, as the one who did not belong. They saw a legend walking through their halls, wearing the skin of a ghost. He returned not to fit in, but to show them that something greater had awakened. The academy that once laughed now stood silent as the forgotten walked among them once more. The academy did not sleep after Jace returned. The night air buzzed with whispers and unease. Some cadets tried to stay brave, laughing in low voices when they thought no one listened, but even their laughter sounded thin like paper before fire. The instructors held quiet meetings behind closed doors, voices raised, then silenced as the truth settled heavy in the halls. They had all seen it, the armor, the ship, the way the systems obeyed him, without question, the way the energy shifted when he walked past. It was more than technology, it was more than war gear, it was something beyond their reach, something ancient, something that made even their highest weapons look like toys. In a storming the weapon lab, they tried to scan the armor from a distance, but their instruments broke with soft cracks and spark screens turned black. Data vanished as if erased by a hand too fast to follow. One scientist whispered the word alive and would not speak again. They called for tests, challenges, duels. Jace agreed, not because he wanted to prove anything, but because he needed to understand what the armor could do. In the training pit, the strongest cadet faced him wearing full battle gear. Enhanced strength, reflex boosters, shock shields. The crowd watched with tight breath. The duel started with speed and fury. The cadet charged, but Jace did not move. He raised his hand and the air bent. The cadet flew backward, his armor twisted and his weapon shattered before it even struck. Jace did not speak. He simply turned and walked away. Word spread fast across the galaxy. Whispers of a human wrapped in forbidden's power, whispers of an armor that moved like a god's shadow. Planets where old stories were still told began to remember names and warnings carved into stone and blood. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. They gathered across systems through light and signal, their faces cold and serious. Some demanded Jace be detained, others spoke of experiments, control, safety. The Academy sent a request, not a question. Jace must report to the council and answer for what he had brought back. He stood in front of them, not with guards at his side, but alone, his armor quiet, his voice calm. He told them what the ship showed him, maps filled with danger systems marked in red, forgotten fleets that never returned, voices trapped in data crying out through broken code. He told them about the memory and the armor, the battles, the fall of something too great to understand, the way the galaxy once held peace through balance until the balance broke. One elder counselor asked, who gave him the right to wear such a thing, to carry such power? Jace did not answer with pride, he answered with truth. The armor chose me not because I am special, but because I was willing to listen, because I did not laugh when I saw something broken. I tried to fix it because I believed there was still more out there worth saving. Some nodded slowly, others scowled and whispered the word threat. The vote was cast in silence, and the result was Jace would not be hunted, not yet. But he could not remain among them, not while the armor still answered only to him, not while the ship refused to obey any other. Had they called it mercy, but he knew the truth. They feared him not because of what he had done, but because of what he might become. The Academy watched as he prepared to leave. Some cadets stepped back, afraid. Others stared with wide eyes and silent awe. The ship waited, its ramp open, light soft and warm, as if it knew the moment had come. Exarvin stood near the edge of the crowd, his arms crossed, his jaw tight, but he said nothing, not a word, not an insult, not a challenge, only a nod. That Jace returned without returning. The stars opened above, and the ship lifted without sound, engines barely humming as it rose into the dark. Jace stood at the window, watching the Academy grow small. Beneath him, its lights no longer bright, its towers no longer tall. He did not know where the map would take him, only that it pointed away from safety, away from comfort, toward places where others had fallen and never risen. But he felt no fear. The armor at his side pulsed steady. The ship around him sang soft songs in a language forgotten by time. He was not just a soldier now, not just a human who wanted to belong. He was something else, a bridge between what was lost and what might still be saved. As he moved through the void, stars blinking like eyes in the dark, the name they gave him echoed in silence, the guardian of the flame, the one who woke what should have stayed asleep, the power that should not exist, but now could not be denied. Asterisk. The stars drifted past like slow falling snow as the ship carried Jace into the unknown. The map glowed faint in his vision, pointing toward a system once marked safe, now colored in red with a flickering symbol beside it. The symbol meant lost but not silent. Jace sat in the command chamber, watching the route unfold. The armor had changed again, adjusting to his body, shaping itself smoother, stronger, more in tune with his thoughts. The ship spoke in quiet pulses through the walls, showing him data from systems it once visited, images of cities, now ruined, ships floating lifeless in deep orbit, signals repeating the same word, help. He reached the edge of the system and stopped drifting among old satellites that no longer answered pings, their surfaces scorched and broken. The planet below showed signs of life, but only in shadows, nothing moved in. The open everything hid. The ship scanned the surface and showed strange patterns, places where something had touched the land and melted it, patterns like claws or teeth marks. But on stone. Jace took the ship down into the thick clouds, engines muffled, as if the air did not want sound to escape. The surface was dark, despite the star above, as if light had forgotten this world. He walked through the ruins of a city with no name, buildings half-crushed, metal torn into shapes that made no sense, no sign of fire, no sign of normal weapons. It looked like something alive had torn through everything, with no purpose other than to break. He found bodies frozen in glass cases, not preserved by design, but trapped, their faces twisted in fear, eyes wide, mouths open, no marks, no wounds, just stillness. The armor pulsed stronger here, as if remembering something. Jace followed its pull to the center of the city, where a tower still stood, barely leaning to one side, held up by roots of black crystal that pulsed. When he neared inside, he found a chamber that did not belong here. Its walls curved like the ship's, lined with the same strange veins of light. In the center, a console hummed, alive with his touch, and showed him an image not from the past, but from now. A fleet moved toward this system, cloaked in shadow, ships shaped like blades, Surrounded by clouds of energy that shifted like mist, the armor identified the ships not with names, but warning symbols that meant devourers, harvesters, destroyers. They were not part of any known empire, not listed in any database. The galaxy had forgotten them, but the armor had not. The fleet was heading for nearby systems, not just to conquer, but to erase, and Jace was the only one who saw them coming. He returned to the ship and set course toward the nearest colony world, a small place where farmers lived under twin moons, unaware of the storm heading their way. He arrived as the shadows began to form in orbit, dark lines slicing through space like knives. The colony sent out a signal for help, but no one answered. The ship blocked the first strike, a beam of dark energy that cracked against its shields and vanished into light. Jace moved fast, flying between the attackers, drawing their fire away from the ground, his armor glowing with heat as he took hit after hive. Landed in the middle of the colony as the first wave dropped from the sky, tall, thin figures with limbs like spears, eyes burning with hollow hunger. The farmer's ransom tried to fight, others simply froze, but when Jace stepped forward, the attackers paused as if confused. The armor flared with power, and the ground cracked beneath his feet. He raised his hand, and the air bent. A wave of force slammed into the shadow things, sending them flying into broken walls. His movements were not fast, but exact, each strike a line drawn in light, each block a wall of heat. The armor fed on the enemy's energy, pulling it in and turning it back, brighter, sharper, louder by the time the last shadow fell. The colonists had gathered behind him, silent, eyes wide, children holding their parents' hands. No one spoke for a long moment. Then a small voice asked, "Is he one of them?" Mother replied, "No, he is something else." Jace turned and looked at the stars again. The shadows were not done. They had only tested the edge. The real wave was still coming, and the map in his mind showed more systems blinking red, now some turning black. The war had not started with him, but it would not move forward without him. He was no longer running, no longer trying to be accepted now. He was hunted not just by fear or politics, but by something older, something deeper, and the shadows knew his name, because the armor remembered their taste, and now they remembered pain. The war in the shadows had begun, and Jace stood between the stars and the silence, ready to fight for the light that still burned across the dark. The stars no longer felt quiet as Jace drifted through the edge of the galaxy. The armor was still warm from the last battle. Its surface marked by glowing scars that pulsed like slow lightning. His hands rested on the control panel as the ship moved silently toward a space station once thought untouchable, now flickering with emergency lights and broken signals. He did not come to ask for help. He came to warn again, but this time not with words, this time with proof. The last planet he saved was quiet now, its people rebuilding, its sky clear, but the next would not be so lucky. The shadows were spreading faster, and the map inside his mind was flashing more red, more black, more silence. As he approached the station, they hailed him with fear in their voices, requesting identification, asking him to turn back, declaring restricted access, but the ship ignored them and docked with no resistance. The armor responded to every security field with a low hum that made machines flicker and go dead. Jace stepped out, and the station fell. Silent guards raised weapons, but lowered them as the armor shifted to match their targeting systems, weapon for weapon, defense for threat. The council was waiting again, their faces tired, their pride cracked. Some had aged in days, their eyes no longer sharp with power, but wide with worry. They asked him what he brought this time, what danger now approached, and Jace showed them. He replayed the battle, not from a drone, not from a screen, but from memory. The armor projected the images across the chamber, the sky black with enemy ships, the colony burning, the children hiding behind rubble, the shadows falling like knives. And then they saw him, not Jace, not the human they mocked, but something else moving through fire and screams like a storm made of light and vengeance. He told them the shadows would not stop. They had waited long enough in silence, and now they were feeding again, system by system, world by world. The council asked if he had allies, if others had answered the call. He told them no, not yet. They asked if he could stop the darkness alone. He looked at them and said, "I will, if I must." The silence that followed was not weak, it was heavy. The council did not vote this time. They did not argue or demand or send him away again. Instead, they asked what he needed. Just requested only one thing. Time. The ship guided him to an ancient sector long abandoned. By charts, a place where once a forge had burned bright, building weapons not for war but for peace, tools that shaped the early balance before it shattered. He stepped onto the dead world and found it not dead at all. Machines slept beneath, the sandlights blinked as the armor sang old words in forgotten tomes, and the ground opened to welcome him. The forge lit once more. He spent days shaping new defenses, new weapons, not for himself, but for others, for those who would come when they saw the truth, for those who still believed in courage. Even when fear ruled the stars, the armor split and grew, forming twins of itself, lighter, faster, meant for those not yet chosen but brave enough to try. The first came days later, a young alien girl whose family Jace had saved. She walked through the forge with unsure steps, but her eyes did not waver when the armor tested her. She did not break. She became the first of Manya warrior, not of Earth, not of history, but of now others. Followed, drawn by the stories, by the flames in the sky, by the whisper that someone had stood alone and lived. Jace taught them not just how to fight, but why to fight, how to stand when alone, how to listen when silence pressed down, how to protect not out of duty but choice. The war grew faster than expected. The shadows did not fear numbers, they consumed them. But they feared the armor, the forge, the will that would not bend, and most of all they feared the one who stood first, the human who walked into the dead ship and woke it with a touch, the one who wore memory like steel, the one who stood when all others turned. They no longer called him weak, they no longer laughed, they no longer asked what a human was doing among stars meant for giants. They called him guardian, flamebreaker of silence, the human they now fear. And as the galaxy began to turn its eyes, not to thrones or fleets, but to one figure in glowing armor standing between light and shadow, the stars themselves seemed to burn brighter, as if they too remembered the name of the one who refused to fall.